Imagine insulting a poor old farmer for years, laughing at his torn clothes, calling him a failure, and believing he would die with nothing. Now imagine standing at his funeral, only to discover that the man you mocked wasn't poor at all. He had secretly built the future of your entire village, and left behind a letter so powerful that it made grown men cry and changed thousands of lives forever. Mzee Juma spent his whole life helping people in silence, expecting nothing in return. But after his death, one shocking secret and one final letter revealed the truth about the man everyone had misunderstood. The people who once looked down on him were suddenly forced to face the biggest regret of their lives. Did the village deserve his forgiveness? Who inherited his hidden fortune? And what was written in the final letter that changed the entire village forever? Watch this video until the very end to discover what happened next, who received Mzee Juma's incredible legacy, and the emotional ending that left an entire village in tears. Trust me, you won't want to miss the final moments. In the heart of a small African village called Kasanga, there lived an old farmer named Mzee Juma Kamau. Every morning, before the sun painted the sky orange, he was already walking to his tiny farm with nothing but an old hoe resting on his shoulder. His clothes were faded, his shoes were torn, his hands were rough from years of hard work. People often wondered how a man could work so hard and still remain so poor. The truth was, nobody knew. Children laughed whenever they saw him. There goes old Juma, the poorest farmer in the village. Even some adults mocked him openly. Look at him, 40 years of farming, and he still owns nothing. Whenever they laughed, Juma simply smiled. He never argued. He never insulted anyone back. He only replied with the same words. The harvest doesn't always come in the season people expect. Nobody understood what he meant. One afternoon, a young businessman named Kelvin Odieno drove through the village in a brand new black SUV. People gathered around to admire the expensive vehicle. Kelvin looked at Juma, who was carrying a sack of maize on his back. He laughed loudly. Old man, you've been farming all your life, and you're still carrying crops on your own shoulders? The crowd burst into laughter. Kelvin pulled out a $100 bill. He threw it onto the dusty road. There, buy yourself some decent clothes. Everyone laughed even harder. Juma slowly picked up the money, walked toward Kelvin. Everyone expected him to return it. Instead, he folded the bill carefully, placed it back into Kelvin's shirt pocket, then smiled. My son, keep it. You may need it more than I do someday. The laughter became even louder. Kelvin shook his head. He's gone mad. As he drove away, dust covered Juma's old clothes. But he didn't seem bothered. That evening, Juma returned home to his small mud house. It had only 2 rooms, an old wooden table, one bed, and shelves filled with worn-out notebooks. Every notebook carried dates, names, figures, and handwritten notes. No one in the village had ever seen them. After saying his evening prayers, he opened one notebook. He quietly wrote, "Another day, another chance to choose kindness over pride." Then he closed it. Across the village, most people believed Juma had no family, but there was someone who visited him every weekend. A 12-year-old orphan boy named Tariq. Tariq had lost both parents years earlier. Most villagers ignored him. Some chased him away. Only Juma welcomed him. Every Saturday, the old farmer taught him how to plant maize, how to grow vegetables, how to respect the land, but most importantly, how to become a good man. One afternoon, while they rested beneath a large mango tree, Tariq asked, "Grandfather, why don't you get angry when people insult you?" Juma smiled. "Because angry hearts stop listening." The boy looked confused. "But they hurt you." Juma gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "My child, when people throw stones at a fruit tree, they're not attacking the tree. They're trying to reach the fruit." Tariq smiled. Although he didn't fully understand, he never forgot those words. Months passed. The village entered a terrible drought. Rain disappeared. Crops dried up. Animals became weak. Farmers began losing everything. One after another, families sold their land to survive. Even Kelvin's successful transport business started collapsing. Loans piled up. Fuel prices increased. His expensive lifestyle became impossible to maintain. Still, people continued mocking Juma, because somehow, his small farm remained green. Nobody understood why. Every evening, they secretly watched from a distance, trying to discover his secret. But Juma never spoke about it. One cold morning, the village woke to shocking news. Mzee Juma had collapsed while working alone in his field. Neighbors rushed to help. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. The entire village gathered for his funeral, not because they loved him, but because everyone was curious. As the ceremony ended, a black SUV slowly entered the cemetery. A well-dressed lawyer stepped out carrying a sealed envelope. He walked directly toward the village chief. "My name is Barrister David Mensah. I was Mr. Juma Kamau's lawyer." The villagers exchanged confused looks. "Lawyer? The poor farmer had a lawyer?" Barrister David nodded. "Yes. And before his death, he left one final letter. He instructed me to read it to every single person in this village." The crowd became completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. No one could imagine what an old, poor farmer could possibly have written that required the entire village to hear it. Little did they know, those few pages would change their lives forever. The cemetery became completely silent. Hundreds of villagers stood without moving. Some wiped sweat from their foreheads. Others exchanged confused glances. Barrister David slowly opened the old brown envelope. Its edges had turned yellow with age. On the front, only one sentence was written. "Please read this after I am gone." The lawyer unfolded the letter carefully, then began reading. "To everyone in Kasanga village." His voice echoed across the cemetery. "If you are hearing these words, then my journey on earth has ended. First, don't feel sorry for me. I lived a peaceful life. I planted more than crops. I planted hope." The villagers listened quietly. Some lowered their heads. The lawyer continued. "Many of you laughed at my old clothes. You called me poor. Some of you even insulted me in front of your children. But I never hated you, because people can only give what fills their hearts." A heavy silence spread through the crowd. Kelvin slowly removed his sunglasses. His eyes were fixed on the ground. The lawyer kept reading. "Do you remember the day a little orphan boy named Tariq almost died of hunger? Most people walked past him, but I shared my only meal with him." Tariq immediately burst into tears. He remembered that day clearly. He hadn't eaten for 2 days. Old Juma had given him the only food inside his house. The lawyer continued. "Do you remember the widow named Mama Rahima, whose roof collapsed during the rainy season?" Several villagers looked toward an elderly woman standing near the back. She covered her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Many believed strangers repaired her house. It wasn't strangers. It was me. The crowd gasped. Mama Rahima began crying. "I never knew. I never knew it was him." The lawyer turned another page. "Do you remember when the village school nearly closed because children had no books?" The school principal suddenly froze. "I remember." The lawyer smiled sadly. "Every notebook I sold at the market, every sack of maize I harvested, every extra coin I earned, helped by those books." The principal couldn't hold back his tears. The anonymous donor was Juma. Barrister David nodded. "Yes." Whispers spread across the cemetery. "No, it can't be." The lawyer continued. "Many believed I stayed poor because I failed in life." He paused. "Then read the next line slowly. The truth is, I chose to remain simple, so others could live better." Several villagers began crying openly, even those who had laughed at him. Then Barrister David reached the final page. "This part," he said quietly, "explains everything." The villagers leaned forward, waiting. 42 years ago, I discovered water deep beneath my farmland. Experts offered me millions to sell the land. I refused. The crowd looked confused. The lawyer continued. "Instead, I secretly allowed engineers to build underground water channels beneath the village. That is why, even during drought, our wells never completely dried." The village chief's face turned pale. He whispered, "So, the water was because of Juma?" Barrister David nodded. "The entire irrigation system exists because he donated his land." The villagers stared at each other in disbelief. Kelvin couldn't believe what he was hearing. The same old farmer he had humiliated had quietly saved the entire village years ago. Then came another shocking revelation. Barrister David opened a thick folder. "There is more." The crowd fell silent again. Mr. Juma owned nearly 1,500 acres of farmland outside Kasanga. The villagers gasped. He never told anyone. He leased the land through different farming cooperatives. The profits were invested for decades. Kelvin whispered. "He wasn't poor?" The lawyer looked directly at him. "No. He was one of the wealthiest farmers in the entire region." The cemetery erupted into whispers. "But why would he live like that?" Barrister David smiled sadly. He believed wealth should serve people, not impress them. Then he removed one final document. The last page contains his final request. Everyone held their breath. Everything I own, every farm, every investment, every account will not be inherited by relatives. People looked confused. If not relatives, then who? The lawyer looked toward the crowd, searching. Finally, his eyes stopped on Tarek. The frightened orphan stepped back. Me? Barrister David smiled. Yes, come here. Tarek slowly walked forward. His hands trembled. The lawyer gently placed the document into his hands, then read the final sentence aloud. I leave everything to the boy who never visited me because of what I owned, but because of who I was. The crowd gasped. Kelvin closed his eyes. His knees almost gave way. The orphan boy, who owned nothing yesterday, had just become one of the richest young men in the country. But before anyone could react, Barrister David folded the remaining papers. There is one last instruction, and it must be carried out tomorrow morning. The villagers looked at him anxiously. What instruction? The lawyer slowly smiled. You'll all find out tomorrow. No one slept that night. Every house in Kasanga was filled with one question. What could Mzee Juma possibly have planned? Even after his death, no one in Kasanga village slept that night. The streets were unusually quiet. Inside every home, people talked about only one thing. Mzee Juma, the man they had called poor, had secretly been one of the richest farmers in the country. But even more shocking, he had left everything to an orphan boy. Early the next morning, the entire village gathered near Juma's small farmhouse. Government officials arrived. Journalists came from the city. Television cameras were everywhere. Everyone wanted to know what the lawyer meant by one final instruction. Barrister David stepped onto a small wooden platform. Beside him stood Tarek. The young boy looked nervous. He had never stood before such a large crowd. Barrister David raised his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, before Mr. Juma's will is completed, he wanted everyone to witness something. He reached into another brown envelope. This is his final letter. The crowd became silent once again. The lawyer unfolded the paper, then began reading. If today has come, then Tarek has inherited everything I worked for. The young boy lowered his head. The lawyer continued. Many of you may wonder why I didn't leave my wealth to successful people. The answer is simple. Because successful people already have opportunities. I wanted to give hope to someone who had none. Several villagers quietly wiped away tears. Then the lawyer read another paragraph. For years, many people laughed at my old clothes. But not once did Tarek ask me why I looked poor. He only asked how he could become a better man. Tarek couldn't stop crying. He remembered every lesson, every Saturday on the farm, every seed they planted together. The lawyer smiled gently before continuing. If you want to know the secret of my wealth, everyone leaned forward. It was never money. It was patience, kindness, honesty, and knowing that real success is measured by the lives you improve, not the cars you own. The words struck every heart. Even the village chief lowered his head. Barrister David closed the letter, then looked toward Tarek. My son, Mzee Juma also left you one final request. Tarek wiped away his tears. What is it? The lawyer handed him a small iron key. This opens the old wooden barn behind his farmhouse. He said, only you should enter first. Everyone followed Tarek toward the old barn. The wooden doors creaked open. Dust filled the air. At first, the building looked completely empty. Then Tarek noticed another small door hidden beneath old farming tools. He slowly unlocked it. The crowd gasped. It wasn't another storage room. It was a huge underground warehouse, filled from one end to the other. Thousands of sacks of maize, beans, rice, wheat, medical supplies, farming equipment, water tanks, blankets, school uniforms, boxes of books. Everything had been carefully organized. Barrister David smiled. For nearly 20 years, Mzee Juma quietly stored emergency supplies. He always believed one day this village would face hardship. And when that day came, no family would sleep hungry. Women covered their mouths in shock. Old men wiped away tears. The entire village stood speechless. Kelvin slowly walked inside. He looked around the warehouse, then remembered the day he had thrown money at Juma. His legs became weak. He fell to his knees. I'm sorry, he whispered. I judged you because of your clothes. I thought wealth meant expensive cars. I was blind. Tears rolled down his face. For the first time in his life, he truly understood humility. Tarek gently helped him stand, then smiled. Grandfather Juma always said, "People who truly change deserve another chance." Kelvin cried even harder. Weeks later, the news spread across the country. Television stations called Juma the farmer who became a legend. Schools began teaching his story. Universities invited barrister David to speak about his life. Thousands of people visited Kisanga just to see the little farm where one humble man had changed countless lives. But Tariq never forgot Juma's lessons. Although he had inherited millions, he refused to leave the village. Instead, he fulfilled every promise written in Juma's will. He built a modern school, a free medical clinic, a large irrigation system for farmers, a training center where young people learned agriculture without paying a single coin. He also created scholarships for orphans. Every child who had once gone to bed hungry now had hope. As for Kelvin, he sold one of his luxury cars, used the money to buy farming equipment for struggling families. Every weekend, he volunteered on the community farms. Whenever someone praised him, he always replied, "I'm only trying to become half the man Mzee Juma was." Years passed. One beautiful morning, the village unveiled a bronze statue in the center of Kisanga. It wasn't a statue of a president or a wealthy businessman. It was a simple farmer, holding an old hoe over his shoulder, wearing worn-out clothes, and smiling peacefully. Beneath the statue were the words Mzee Juma had repeated all his life. The harvest doesn't always come in the season people expect. Every child who walked past that statue asked the same question. Who was this man? And every elder proudly answered, "He looked poor, but he left us richer than anyone ever could." Because true wealth isn't what you keep. It's what you leave behind in the hearts of others. If you were in Tariq's place and inherited millions from someone who believed in you, would you keep the wealth for yourself or use it to help your entire community? Tell us honestly in the comments and explain why. We read every comment.